There was a time when I thought my wife, Emily, was flawless. And that wasn't just my bias as her husband. It was her brand. Emily didn't just document her life online. She curated it, sculpted it like an artist working on a marble statue of herself. She had the picture-perfect marriage, the Pinterest-worthy home, the kids who always seemed to wear color-coordinated outfits even when they were just relaxing, which in reality meant she'd spent 30 minutes staging a candid shot of them on the couch. She wasn't just Emily. She was Emily of Emily's World, a lifestyle influencer with a growing empire. A self-proclaimed guru of motherhood, marriage, and intentional living, whatever that meant. And for a long time, I believed in it, because believing was easier than questioning. Then the flowers arrived. It was her birthday, and the house was in full production mode. There was a color scheme for the decorations, a brand-approved cake that fit her Instagram aesthetic. Even the lighting had been adjusted, because God forbid her birthday footage had shadows. At some point, the doorbell rang. A delivery guy handed me a massive bouquet of red and white roses, wrapped in a glossy black ribbon. "Oh my gosh, how gorgeous!" Emily gasped, instantly flipping into her influencer voice. She angled herself toward her phone, recording every second. "You guys look at this? Wow. Who could have sent these?" I wasn't even paying attention until I saw the small, white card nestled among the petals. A simple note. Just 2 words. Birds forever. Something in my brain clicked. I couldn't place it at first, but I felt an unease settle in my gut. Like when you realize your car keys aren't in your pocket, but you know you had them a minute ago. "Who's it from?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. Emily barely glanced at the card before slipping it into her pocket. "Oh, just a friend. Nothing important." Then, with the effortless skill of a seasoned performer, she turned back to her camera. "Thank you so much for all the love today, guys. I feel so blessed." I wasn't listening anymore, because my brain had caught up. Birds. She had told me about this. A long time ago, back when she was just Emily the college girl, not Emily the brand. We were drinking wine on the couch one night, swapping stories about past relationships. She laughed as she told me about a guy she used to date, someone from way back. "We used to call each other birds," she had said, rolling her eyes. It was stupid. I had smiled, kissed her, and forgotten about it. Until now, 15 years later, on her birthday, with a bouquet of roses and a note that read, "Birds forever." I glanced at Emily, who was still performing for her audience, blowing kisses to her phone. And in that moment I knew. She was lying. Something wasn't right. And for the first time in our perfect marriage, I wasn't going to ignore it. I was going to find out the truth, even if I didn't like what I found. I told myself I was overthinking it. That's what I always did when something in my marriage felt off. Emily was a professional at making me feel like I was just being paranoid, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. And for years, I had bought into that. But the flowers sat on our kitchen counter, bold and bright, like a silent accusation. And that note, "Birds forever," kept circling in my brain like a vulture over a dying animal. I tried to shake it off, tried to focus on the birthday chaos. Our kids bouncing around, Emily's friends arriving in a perfect parade of curated outfits, the photographer she had hired to document her casual at-home celebration. Because obviously Emily's birthday required a full-scale production. But my mind kept replaying that conversation from years ago. We were in our first apartment, eating takeout on the floor because we hadn't bought a dining table yet. A cheap bottle of wine between us. Emily was tipsy, giggly, and for the first time in a long time, unfiltered. We were swapping dumb stories about our past relationships when she told me about him. "I dated this guy back in college," she had said, rolling her eyes. It was intense, not in a healthy way. "How so?" I had asked. She sighed, swirling her wine. "He was obsessive about me. Like made up his own language for us, obsessive. We had these dumb pet names. He called me Bird, and I called him Bird. I don't even know why. It was just our thing." I had laughed. "You two sound like a Disney movie gone wrong." She smirked. "Yeah, well, it stopped being cute when he started showing up places randomly. Even after we broke up, it got bad. I remember asking if he ever did anything dangerous. Nah, she had said, waving it off. Just a lot of drama. But he was my first big relationship, so I put up with it way longer than I should have. Eventually, he got the message. I haven't heard from him in years, and that was it. A stupid little memory, buried under 15 years of marriage. Until now, I glanced over at Emily, who was across the room laughing with her friends, absolutely unbothered. If this was from him, wouldn't she look at least a little shaken? A little uncomfortable? But she was fine. Normal. Maybe I was overreacting. So, I decided to test it. Later that night, after the party had died down and the kids were in bed, I casually mentioned the flowers. "So, who was the friend?" I asked, pouring myself a drink. Emily was on the couch, scrolling through the flood of birthday messages on her phone. The one who sent the flowers." Her reaction was so quick, so dismissive, it was almost too perfect. "Oh, just someone from work. Probably a client. You know how it is?" I let the silence stretch, waiting. She didn't ask why I was bringing it up again. Didn't try to embellish the lie. Just kept scrolling like the question didn't matter. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't paranoid. She knew who sent them. And she didn't want me to know. Lies start small, then they unravel. And I was about to start pulling the thread. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I wasn't that guy. The kind who lurked in the shadows, stalking his own wife, trying to catch her in a lie. But the thing about doubt, once it takes root, it grows. And suddenly, I was seeing everything differently. The way she had brushed off my questions. The way she had tucked the note into her pocket so quickly, like she didn't want me to look at it too closely. And then the way she started acting a little off. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that would have raised red flags for anyone else. But I knew Emily. I had spent years memorizing her patterns, her habits, the rhythm of her everyday life. And suddenly, things were different. She started going out more. Small things at first. A last-minute girls' night she hadn't mentioned before. A networking dinner that I'd never heard her talk about. And then, about a week after her birthday, she casually dropped something new into conversation. "I'm taking dance classes," she said over breakfast. I nearly choked on my coffee. Emily. Dance classes. This was a woman who refused to step onto a wedding dance floor unless the lights were dim enough to hide her movements. Who once told me that even Zumba felt too humiliating for her. "You are?" I said, setting my mug down carefully. She smiled. "Yeah, just something fun to do for myself." I realized I never make time for me. You know? I nodded slowly. I could have let it go. Could have smiled and said, "That's great, babe," and moved on. But I had this gut feeling. This weird, nagging sensation that I knew was the truth before I even had proof. So, the next time she said she was going to class, I waited 10 minutes after she left. Then I grabbed my keys and followed her. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, that I was just being paranoid, and I'd find her in a normal studio, learning the cha-cha with some middle-aged instructor named Gwen, and I'd feel stupid and go home. But when she pulled into a parking lot on the other side of town, I frowned. This wasn't a studio. It was a small, unmarked building tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. No big glass windows. No sign. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of the car, glancing around before heading inside. No gym bag. No dance shoes. No hesitation. My pulse ticked up. This wasn't a dance class. I waited a few minutes, debating what to do. Then, finally, I got out of my car and walked toward the door. I had no idea what I was about to find, but I had a sinking feeling in my gut. And I knew, without a doubt, I wasn't going to like it. The building didn't make sense. If it was a dance studio, where was the music? The laughter? The sound of people actually dancing? Instead, as I got closer to the entrance, I heard something else. A low murmur. Voices. One of them was Emily's. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized her tone. That soft, controlled voice she used when she wanted to sound effortless. The kind of voice she used in business meetings or when she was charming her way into a better brand deal. The other voice? A man's. I stopped in my tracks. The way he spoke, it wasn't professional. It wasn't casual either. It had a smooth, easy confidence to it. A tone I knew. It was the kind of voice men use when they're trying to draw a woman in. My chest tightened. I had no plan. I wasn't even thinking anymore. I just knew I needed to see, to confirm what my gut was already screaming at me. I reached for the handle. Then, footsteps. I turned just in time to see an older man heading toward the door. He barely glanced at me, but I knew if I stood there too long, I'd look suspicious. So I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my phone, sighed dramatically, and muttered, "Where the hell is the bathroom in this place?" The guy barely reacted, just nodded toward the back, and kept walking. I pretended to follow his direction, stepping further inside the building. The hallway was dimly lit, the air thick with something. Cheap cologne? Sweat? I wasn't sure. I took a breath and turned back toward the door I had almost opened. Now that I was closer, I could hear them more clearly. Emily's voice was softer now, almost playful. The man's voice was lower, more intense. A slow, deliberate tone. I knew that tone. And then, just as I was about to step forward, a sound, something that for half a second didn't register. And then it did. A low, breathy moan. Not a pain sound, not a frustrated sound. A sound I knew intimately. A sound I had heard from my wife. Just never when she was talking to someone else. My whole body went hot. I felt my breath leave me in one sharp exhale. My hands curled into fists, a violent instinct kicking in, an urge to tear through the door and end whatever the hell was happening inside. But then, another set of footsteps. A woman's laughter echoed from further down the hall. I had seconds. If I busted through that door now, I wouldn't just be confronting Emily. I'd be making a scene. And Emily? She was calculated. She was smart. She would find a way to spin this, to manipulate the situation, to make me the bad guy. So I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I forced myself to step away. I walked down the hall, through the exit, and back into the night. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my pulse roaring in my ears. I had no proof, no evidence, just a sound. But that sound, it was enough, because I suddenly knew, with absolute, gut-wrenching certainty, my wife was cheating on me. I sat in my car for what felt like hours. My hands were still clenched around the steering wheel, my knuckles stiff and white. My jaw ached from how hard I was biting down. My breath felt wrong, shallow, uneven, like my body was refusing to function the way it was supposed to. Emily was inside that building. With him. I didn't need to see it. That sound, that moan was burned into my brain. And yet a small, pathetic part of me still clung to the idea that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe this was just some weird misunderstanding. And if I confronted her now, she'd laugh, roll her eyes, and say, "Oh my God, Mark, are you seriously being jealous over a dance class?" But deep down, I knew the truth. And the truth was rotting me from the inside out. My vision was tunneling. My body was vibrating with so much adrenaline that I couldn't think straight. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't just sit there. I had to do something. I yanked open the car door and got out. My feet hit the pavement, but I barely felt it. I was marching toward the entrance before I had fully decided what I was going to do. I wasn't thinking. I was reacting. I reached for the handle again. And this time, I wasn't hesitating. I shoved the door open with so much force that it banged against the wall. The hallway stretched out before me, dimly lit, eerily quiet now. And then, a new sound. Shuffling. A quick, muffled movement, like someone scrambling. I stormed forward. There was only one door slightly open, light spilling into the hall. I didn't slow down. I kicked it open, and there she was, Emily. Standing there, half-dressed, her hair a mess, her lipstick smudged. And next to her, a man, shirt unbuttoned, smug expression on his face. I had never seen him before in my life, and that somehow made it worse, because I had built up this whole theory about the guy from her past, the Birds Forever note, the ex-boyfriend. But this wasn't him. This was someone else entirely. Emily's mouth opened. "Mark!" But I wasn't listening anymore. Because I was already moving, straight toward the man who had just ruined my life. I didn't stop to think. I just reacted. 1 second, I was standing in the doorway, staring at my half-dressed wife and the man beside her. The next, I had him against the wall, his shirt bunched in my fists. "What the hell are you doing with my wife?" My voice didn't even sound like mine. The guy barely looked fazed. His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a smirk. "Hey man, relax." Relax? He had the nerve to tell me to relax? Emily was behind me now, her hands grabbing at my arms. Mark, stop. Just let him go. I ignored her. My focus was locked on him. Who are you? I demanded. How long has this been going on? Mark, Emily hissed. This isn't. Don't. I didn't look at her. Don't even start. The guy finally lifted his hands in mock surrender. Look, man, I didn't know she was married. A lie. A stupid lie. The way he said it, the casual tone, the lack of anything resembling guilt. It sent another wave of anger through me. I wanted to break something. I wanted to break him. Instead, I let go of his shirt and took a step back. Because suddenly, I realized something. Beating the guy up? It wouldn't change anything. Emily had already done the damage. She was the one who had walked into this room, knowing exactly what she was doing. She was the one who had lied to me. She was the one who had betrayed me. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Her arms were wrapped around herself now, like she was trying to shield herself from my gaze. But I saw everything. The guilt, the shame, and beneath it all, a flicker of something else. Something I couldn't quite name. Not yet, but I would. And when I did, it would change everything. The car ride home was silent. Emily sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window like she wanted to be anywhere but next to me. Good, because I wanted to be anywhere but next to her. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. Every muscle in my body was wound up, tense, ready to snap. I needed answers. I needed to hear her say it. The second we walked into the house, I turned to her. How long? Emily blinked. Mark, how long? A beat of silence. Then, 2 months. The number hit me like a punch. 2 months. While I had been kissing her goodbye every morning. While I had been putting our kids to bed. While I had been living my life like an idiot, thinking we were happy. Why? My voice was quieter now. Emily exhaled slowly. Then she looked me right in the eye. He lets me feel in control. I felt something inside me crack. Control? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. You had to cheat on me to feel in control? You don't understand, she snapped. You always see me as this perfect wife, this perfect mother, this perfect woman. But I'm not. I never have been. And with him, I could just be me. I stared at her. The audacity. The sheer audacity of this woman to stand in front of me, in our home, and act like she was the victim in all this. Like I was the problem. Like her betrayal was my fault. I walked over to the desk in the corner of the room, pulled open a drawer, and grabbed a folder. Emily's face twisted in confusion as I tossed it onto the table in front of her. What's this? Divorce papers. Her head snapped up. Mark, I already had them drafted, I said, my voice flat. Months ago. Didn't file them because I thought things were fine. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to argue. But she didn't. Because she knew. She knew. The only reason we had lasted this long was because I had been choosing to ignore the signs. But now I was done pretending. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, I said over my shoulder. Emily's voice was small. And tomorrow? I didn't look back. Tomorrow, I file. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room, my head pounding. I hadn't slept. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Not the version of her I had loved, but the version I had seen in that dimly lit room. The one with smudged lipstick and a guilty expression. The one who had looked right at me and admitted everything without an ounce of regret. He lets me feel in control. I couldn't get those words out of my head. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged me to stay. No, the only time she looked worried was when I put the divorce papers in front of her. That's when it hit me. Emily didn't care about losing me. She cared about losing her image. The brand. The empire. The perfect life she had built online. And that gave me an idea. A cruel, beautiful, perfect idea. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to burn her empire to the ground. So, while Emily was still asleep, I made a pot of coffee, sat down on my laptop, and started planning. Step 1. Documentation. I spent the next few hours going through everything, old messages, emails, our shared bank statements. If she had been careless enough to cheat, she had probably been careless enough to leave a trail. And oh, did she? Bank transfers to an unknown account. Hotel charges. A suspiciously expensive dinner on a night she told me she was working late. I even found a deleted message thread on our shared cloud storage. She had tried to erase it, but not before it auto-backed up. And that's when I found it. A selfie, taken in a dimly lit hotel room. Her and him, both of them smiling at the camera like they were posing for a vacation album. I stared at it for a long time, my hands tightening into fists. Then, without hesitation, I saved it. Step 2. The website. I registered a domain name, thetrueofamily.com. A simple, clean title. Just facts. No embellishments. No exaggeration. Because I didn't need to lie. The truth was damning enough. I started laying it out, her infidelity, the messages, the photo. A timeline of betrayal, with one section titled, The True Face of the Perfect Family. And the best part? I wasn't even close to being done. By the time Emily woke up, I had enough dirt to bury her twice over. She walked into the kitchen looking disheveled, her eyes puffy, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Morning, she mumbled like this was just another day. Like she hadn't blown up our marriage less than 24 hours ago. I didn't say anything, just sipped my coffee and watched her. After a few seconds, she glanced at me, frowning. What? You didn't even try to apologize. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. Mark, can we not do this right now? Not do what? I tilted my head. Talk about how you cheated on me? She bristled. I told you it wasn't. Don't. My voice came out sharper than I intended. I don't want to hear your excuses. I just want to know one thing. She crossed her arms. What? Why did you think you'd get away with it? She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. For the first time, she actually looked nervous. Mark, I cut her off. I mean, you knew I'd find out eventually, right? So, what was the plan? Were you just going to play dumb? Fake cry? Try to convince me I was crazy. Silence. I let out a slow, humorless laugh. You really thought you could manipulate me, huh? She swallowed. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I challenged. Emily shifted uncomfortably, looking away. I didn't think you'd actually leave. There it was. The truth. She had counted on me staying. She had banked on my loyalty, on my love, on the fact that for 15 years, I had always put our family before anything else. She had assumed that I would do it again. She had gambled with our marriage. And now, she was losing. I stood up, grabbing my keys. I'll be out for a few hours. Where are you going? She asked, her voice laced with something that almost sounded like panic. I didn't answer, because if I told her the truth, that I was heading to my lawyer's office, armed with all the evidence I had gathered, she might have tried to stop me. But it was too late for that. Way too late. Emily had made her choice. Now it was time for her to live with it. There's a specific kind of calm that settles over you when you know you're about to end something. Not the panicked, emotional storm I had expected. No rage, no heartbreak, no screaming in an empty room. Just clarity, a cold, precise certainty. Emily had built her life on an illusion, and I was about to rip it apart. I walked into my lawyer's office with a folder full of irrefutable proof. Bank statements, messages, photos. Everything I needed to ensure that when this divorce went through, she wouldn't walk away unscathed. Vicky Sampson, my lawyer, flipped through the documents with the kind of slow, deliberate movements that told me she was enjoying this. Damn, she muttered, holding up the hotel selfie. She really let herself get sloppy, huh? She thought I wouldn't leave, I said. Vicky raised an eyebrow. Yeah? And what made her so sure of that? I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Because I never did before. She nodded like that was the most predictable thing in the world. Well, good news. She tapped the stack of papers. This is a win, especially with that prenup. The prenup. The one I had barely thought about in 15 years. Emily's mother had insisted on it before we got married. At the time, I thought it was weird. A prenup when neither of us had any money? But she had been adamant. I had skimmed through the pages, signed my name, and forgotten about it. Until now. Until Vicky grinned, flipping to one particularly damning page. She waved spousal support, she said, tapping the text. And there's a clause about infidelity. I sat forward. Meaning she doesn't get a dime. I'll let that sink in. Emily, who had spent years crafting an image of financial success, of a perfect life, of an empire, was about to lose everything. She just didn't know it yet. I stood. Good. File it. Vicky smirked. With pleasure. I walked out of her office, pulled out my phone, and logged onto thetrueofemily.com. It was time. I hit publish. I didn't tell Emily about the website. Didn't need to. The internet did that for me. Within 24 hours, her empire imploded. One by one, the cracks in her perfect facade split wide open. Sponsors pulled out. Her comments section exploded. Screenshots of the website spread like wildfire. And the headline that accompanied them? The true face of Emily. Influencer exposed for living a lie. I watched it all unfold from my office. Phone buzzing nonstop with messages from everyone who had ever known us. Texts from mutual friends, former brand partners, even her own sister. What the hell is happening? Is this real? Dude, I thought you guys were perfect. That last one almost made me laugh. Perfect. That was the real illusion, wasn't it? Emily had spent years crafting a world where she was untouchable, where she was the gold standard of marriage, motherhood, and ambition, where she had the dream life, and everyone else should want to be like her. And now she was a laughingstock. It took less than a day for her to lose the life she had spent years creating. By the next morning, she was in full panic mode. And for the first time in days, she called me. Not a text, not an email, a call. I stared at my phone, watching her name flash across the screen. Then, finally, I picked up. There was silence at first. Then, Mark. Her voice was raw, almost unrecognizable. I said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, "What have you done?" I let the silence stretch. Emily was waiting for an answer, but for once in her life, she wasn't in control of the conversation. She wasn't performing, wasn't curating, wasn't shaping the narrative to fit her brand. She was just cornered. Finally, I spoke. "What have I done?" I repeated, my voice calm. "Emily, all I did was show people who you really are." "You destroyed me," she snapped. I almost laughed. She sounded less like a betrayed wife and more like a CEO whose company had just gone bankrupt overnight. Because, in a way, that's exactly what had happened. Emily's brand, her entire identity, was built on one thing: perfection. And now, she was trending for all the wrong reasons. "Mark, please." Her voice cracked. "Take the site down. We can talk about this. We can fix it. There's no we, Emily. You're ruining my life." I let out a slow breath, gripping my phone tighter. "You ruined your own life. I'm just making sure people see the truth." She tried a different tactic. "Think about the kids," she pleaded. "Do you really want them seeing all this?" My jaw clenched. She dared to bring up our children now? After she was the one who blew up our family? "You don't get to play the good mother card," I said coldly. "Not when I have proof that you were sneaking around while they were sleeping upstairs." Emily inhaled sharply. "What proof?" "Bank records, hotel receipts, texts, and let's not forget the photo." Her breath hitched. "Ah, there it was." "Here's the thing, Emily," I continued. "I don't actually care about your brand. You can try to rebrand, spin the story however you want. But the one thing you won't do? Take my kids down with you." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Mark, don't." "Don't what?" I cut her off. "Don't file for full custody?" "Because that's exactly what I'm doing." Panic seeped into her tone. "You can't do that." "Oh, I can. And with everything I have, the court will side with me." She didn't say anything because she knew I was right. She could handle losing her reputation, her sponsors, even her house. But losing control of her perfect family image, that was her worst nightmare. And I was making it a reality. The custody battle was short, painfully short. Emily had no leg to stand on. Between the proof of her affair, the financial records showing she had used our money to fund it, and the absolute collapse of her public reputation, the court had no trouble deciding. Primary custody? Me. Visitation? Limited. Emily sat in the courtroom, watching as the judge signed the papers that solidified her downfall. I watched too, not because I felt triumphant, but because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment she realized that she hadn't just lost her marriage. She had lost everything. Afterward, as I was leaving the courthouse, I felt my phone vibrate. A new email. From Emily. Subject: one last chance. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked, and as I read her message, I realized something. She still didn't understand. She wasn't sorry. Not for what she had done. Not for betraying me. Not for lying. She was sorry she got caught. And her email? It wasn't an apology. It was a plea. A desperate attempt to salvage whatever was left of her old life. Mark, please. We can still fix this. We can make the public believe it was just a misunderstanding. I can say I was in a bad place, that we were separated. We can rebuild. You don't have to forgive me. Just don't destroy me any more than you already have. I stared at the screen. Rebuild. Like this was some PR disaster that could be spun into a comeback story. Like I was just another accessory in her brand. I exhaled. Then I typed 2 words. Too late. And I hit send. Emily always used to say that perception was everything. Well, now the world saw the real her. And no rebrand could erase that. Emily didn't respond to my email. Not immediately. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a carefully crafted answer, a perfectly polished statement. No way to spin the narrative in her favor. Because this wasn't just a scandal. This was who she really was. And now, everyone knew it. Her Instagram, once flooded with aspirational comments from devoted followers, had turned into a war zone. Wait, so your entire marriage was a lie? Girl, not the intentional living, queen intentionally cheating. Your poor husband. Your poor kids. You deserve this. Every time she tried to post some damage control statement, it got ratioed into oblivion. Her sponsors? Gone. Her brand deals? Pulled. Her followers? Dropping by the thousands. It was over. And I watched it all happen in real time, drinking my coffee, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction. Not regret. Just finality. Emily always said she was in control. But not anymore. A month passed. Then 2. Life started to settle into something new. Something better. The kids adjusted surprisingly fast. I kept things steady, kept our routine going. I became the parent they needed, the one who put them first. Emily? She tried to stage a comeback. A rebrand. First, it was the I'm stepping away from social media to heal post. Then, the I made mistakes, but I'm learning from them video. Then, a podcast appearance where she tried to frame herself as a complicated woman who was searching for self-fulfillment. None of it worked, because once the world sees who you really are, you can't go back. The last I heard, she was living with her mother, trying to figure out her next move. The Emily that once ruled social media? Dead. And me? I was free. Not just from her. From the version of myself that had spent years believing in an illusion. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, when my phone buzzed. A text. From Emily. I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I stared at the screen for a long time, then, without hesitation, I deleted the message. No response. No second chances. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. And some people, they don't deserve a rebrand.